Long time no see, huh? Last time I talked about Power Rangers, Dino Fury was about to premiere. Well, it's been 2 years. The show is over, and I thought it would be worth kind of coming back and talking about the show. How it turned out, and what I thought of it. Less Green with Evil parallels, though. More like Green with Sapphire. Power Rangers Dino Fury. The 20, who the hell knows how to count them at this point, entry in the Power Rangers series. And the second produced by Hasbro. The show uses footage and costumes from 2019's Kichiru Sentairu Soldier, because that show had dinosaur knights in it. And those two words can and will make a little kid freak out and start bouncing off the walls. It's also the first entry under new showrunner Simon Bennett, who takes over from longtime series writer Chip Lynn, and also the final entry to air on Nickelodeon, and the first to air on Netflix, switching homes between seasons. I also think it's pretty good. Let's unpack that. Now, where better to start than the cast? The cast makes or breaks a new Power Rangers season, and unlike the Brands era casts, no one here feels like they've been held back from giving a good performance, or like they're talking down to the kids in the audience. On top of that, the actors all have the best chemistry I've ever seen out of the show in years. The friendly banter between them might just be the highlight of the show. The sibling duo of Javi and Izzy Garcia are absolute standouts, but everyone shines, even down to the supporting characters like Ollie's mom, Dr. Arcana, and Amelia's grandfather, Pop Pop, both of whom feel like authentic characters that make the world feel whole rather than the food-based comedy or sci-fi plot delivery devices, which might just be a first for Power Rangers. Let's go a bit more in depth on everyone, in order of appearance. Ollie Arcana, the Dino Fury Blue Ranger, is kind of the blandest character on the show, who started out with the most negative traits to be worked on, but didn't really end up getting the most riveting plot out of it. Specifically, Ollie is full of himself, but clearly cares a lot about his mom and his friends, a fact that he prefers to downplay. A lot of the time in the show is spent on him trying to look cool in front of others out of insecurity, not trying to show his emotions externally, the works. He eventually gets over this in the second season after being outed as a Power Ranger to his mother, and finally asking out his crush, which happens to lead us to Amelia Jones. The Pink Ranger is a big believer in ghosts and the supernatural, as a result of her parents' disappearance under mysterious circumstances. Ooh! She works for this website called BuzzBlast as a reporter. Classic superhero stuff. Very Superman-ish, which is kinda new for Power Rangers itself. Amelia grounds the show in the community with her personal connection to her grandfather and also to her day job. This helps maintain a sense of reality in the middle of all the fantastical goings-on each episode. Her upbeat and curious personality also complements the adventure tone of the show. Her closest fellow ranger is Ollie, with whom she develops a bit of a friendly back-and-forth ribbing dynamic, which eventually evolves into a romantic subplot. Solon, who has one of the rare American original suit designs that's genuinely amazing, occupies a spot that can only be described as teen grandma. She helps the Rangers grow as heroes over the course of the series, providing them with comfort and wisdom. She's one of the best mentors Power Rangers has ever had, especially in comparison to the Saban Brands era that immediately preceded the current regimen. Mentor G and Gosei being characters in the way that Microsoft Clippy is. And Keeper, who's like that too, but then also looks terrifying. They've been course correcting since Quirky Uncle Mick, and actually giving the mentors emotional depth, which is on full display with Solon. She feels like an important, caring figure in these people's lives, and also takes way more direct action in the plot than most mentors. Also, she's voiced by Morgana from SPD. Ain't that crazy? Next is Zato, a knight from planet Rafcon, and the leader of an ancient team of Dino Fury Rangers, who awakens from a 65 million year stasis to form a new team. He's the first Red Ranger since Jaden, whose whole hook is that he's much more experienced than his teammates. On top of that, he also fits into the Alien Ranger fish out of water trope, leading to a fun dynamic where he teaches the rest of the team to be more comfortable as Rangers, as they teach him how to be more comfortable with his life on Earth. That said, he remains haunted by the lingering question of what's become of his home planet and its people. He gains the team's trust and also provides exposition by way of his telepathic memory-sharing abilities, kind of like the Vulcan mind meld from Star Trek, which is a really handy plot device to have. Javi Garcia, the Dino Fury Black Ranger, and probably the first cool guy character in the franchise to actually be effortlessly cool. He feels like an actual honest-to-God dude you know amongst your family or friends, and fits in with Dino Fury's commitment to be current to today's audience instead of being stuck in 90s sensibilities. A big part of his character is his love for music, and his dream of being a musician, which he balances with both rangering and a job at Buzz Blast. His passion for music is the strongest through line for the character, bolstered by the wonderful singing talent of actor Chance Perez, who the crew clearly knew was worth showing off. He's also got a sibling on the team. Seems to be a trend these days, doesn't it? The sibling dynamic between him and his sister Izzy also feels completely real and authentic, elevating both characters high above most family members in Power Rangers. However, what kind of hot, sensitive, dressed in black musician dude would he be without some daddy issues? Courtesy of his dad, Park Warden Garcia, just loving Izzy more. The aforementioned Green Ranger Izzy is possibly the closest to a real teenager Power Rangers has ever gotten. She's just an actual zoomer on the screen. With her vocabulary, her jokes, verbal and non, her great banter with the enemies, they did it! An actual teenager with attitude!
We're here to talk about your phone plan.
Huh?
No more prank calls. That's a move. They'll never beat him on their own.
What's up? I'm Miss Green.
Listening into my combo? Not okay.
And yeah, as mentioned, she gets preferential treatment from Warden Garcia, who supports her unconditionally in ways he doesn't do for Javi, and is a lot softer with the punishments towards her by comparison. An interesting little character detail, incidentally, is that he's Javi's biological dad and Izzy's stepdad. I feel like unpacking that within the show could have made for something interesting, but on the other hand, it is nice to see a blended family and kids media where the fact that they're blended is just casual, not drama fodder. Izzy's also notable for her relationship with her girlfriend Fern, the first time an explicitly queer ranger has been depicted, which got the show nominated for a GLAAD award. It feels like a real sign of where we are with Dino Fury. This is a franchise that was marked from its early years by rampant behind-the-scenes homophobia, a franchise that took 25 years to even hint at queerness, in an edgy reboot move that opened with bull masturbation, and still wasn't brave enough to confirm or deny it. And here we are with a realistic, sincere portrayal of a queer relationship in the actual show. Maybe more than anything else, it's an honest-to-God evolution for the franchise, but also not a one-off. Not just a tiny little bit of lip service, like yeez. Fern's appearances are about as frequent as Amelia's grandfather Pop-Pop, and just as important to the story. It's also a portrayal of a very healthy relationship, something that's way more important to show kids than the moral lessons that were forced into the show by Saban Brand's executives. In fact, Izzy and Fern's relationship is so healthy, they're the ones that help the straight couple on the team together. Oh, for any of you typing up a comment about the Boom comics, don't worry. We'll get there soon. Wait a minute. Something doesn't feel right. Wait. What the? Aw, man. I forgot to turn the TV on. Oh well. I guess we'll just go somewhere else. Entertaining villains are just as important as good heroes. Our villains are a ragtag group formed and led by the enigmatic Void Knight, who operate out of Area 62, an abandoned government facility with the most hilariously on-the-nose name ever, and which looks like a pool hall. Void Knight makes a very strong first impression, living up to Guy Solg's already beloved design from Your Soldier with his intimidating presence, intriguing air of mystery, and some of the best voice acting I've ever heard in Power Rangers. It helps that he isn't just some scenery-chewing, megalomaniacal villain. As the show goes on, we discover he's a normal guy desperately trying to save his comatose wife. It's not an insanely novel concept, it's just sort of Mr. Freeze from Batman the Animated Series. But it allows for exploration of a main villain's humanity, a real empathetic look at the big bad, which is something Power Rangers isn't generally known for. We'll get more into it in the spoiler zone later in the video. As an aside, can I just say how refreshing it is to see the writers actually take the Sentai costume design elements into account when making their story? I cannot count all the times Power Rangers writers have just straight up ignored clearly significant elements from the suit designs for reasons unknown, resulting in both missed story opportunities and just a pretty sloppy looking show. But from literally episode 1 of Dino Fury, it makes a point to establish that, correct, Void Knight's suit does share the same design philosophy as the Rangers, and there is a reason for that that will be explained later. Like, thank you, it was that easy! The lovable mucus is a phrase I never thought I'd say. Much like her Soldier counterpart, mucus serves as a contrast to Void Knight and the other major villains. Hovering around, not being taken seriously, though Terra still shows a soft spot for her. I wonder why. Slider's also a great villain. Not only is he a shapeshifter, which is always really fun, but he really has the presence of a major threat, and even has a cute little arc where he goes from an enormous jerk to Mucus's bestie following a case of amnesia. What follows is an extremely enjoyable dynamic between the two goofballs trying their best to do evil under the watchful eye of their throne-sitting, very angry dad. There is also Boom Tower. His name is funny. This has been the basics on Boom Tower. I tell you what, I mentioned the side characters earlier, but let's go more in depth. Among the first characters we meet is Dr. Arcana, who is both Ollie's mom and the tech guy type character. Always nice to see a female character in that role. She also gets to learn the Rangers' identities before the first season's done, a sort of plotline Power Rangers doesn't really tend to go for very often, especially during the era of Saban Brand's no plot except for premieres and finales mandate, which further evolves her character into an active and knowing ally of the heroes. It's also refreshing to see a hero's mom at all. The rare occasions parents do appear on the show, it's usually dads. Carlos Garcia is Izzy and Javi's dad, who I've already covered a bit during their segment. He was changed mid-production from a cop to a park warden because the writers weren't comfortable with the things that cops do. But it's still pretty noticeable that they wrote him as a cop because he's got way too many responsibilities for a park warden. And people treat him as a cop from time to time. There's also the shot where someone records him doing something bad, in this case, publicly embarrassing Javi, which is clearly a try-it topical imagery of today's social climate. Anyways, yeah. His big arc mainly revolves around his preferential treatment towards Izzy. He supports her in literally everything, from school sports to being in the queer community, but refuses to support Javi's artistic endeavors, only putting up with them when his wife's around. Overall treating adult man with a job Javier Garcia like a little kid in a frustrating way. He does get to grow out of it, though, eventually coming around to the idea of his son being a musician and becoming a textbook corny dad for both our heroes. It's good to see a Power Rangers entry commit so much to long-form development of its supporting cast members, consistently throughout its run. Though, honestly, the show's airing schedule with massive gaps in it made it kind of frustrating to follow live. The major setting for the show that's not the Rangers or villains' home base is the office of BuzzBlast, an online media company where Amelia and Javi work. This fact, plus the company's loose, casual work environment, make the office a natural hangout spot for the cast. I think it's a smart excuse for having one recurring hangout spot set without having to, for instance, make the Rangers all co-workers or all classmates, which would kind of homogenize them. Anyway, I mention it here because the BuzzBlast setting contributes 2 additional supporting characters, the boss, Jane Fairview, and her android assistant, J-Board, who serve as the show's comic relief duo. They're a break from the franchise's comedy duo norm in that they're both older women, which is neat to see, and their humor does feel somewhat more refined and natural than the messy foods and farts nonsense that ate up so much in Ninja Steel. I'd say it lines up more with the natural comedic bits in Sentai, and is more enjoyable as a result. Now, a bit similarly to their immediate predecessors, Jane and J-Borg's comedy scenes will tend to run on wacky cartoon logic, which no one else on the show seems to operate on. This does definitely create a tonal contrast between their comedy scenes and the rest of the show. I do not think that is a weakness of their scenes, however. The weirdness adds more appeal to the characters for me. Our script editor, Glenn, didn't fully agree, and says he found it jarring. But he does not get a writing credit in this video.
Hey, don't you think that's kind of mean?
He wrote that joke. He wrote that joke. So that was a lot on characters, wasn't it? But that's pretty much everyone, so I think we're safe to get a bit deeper into the plot elements. Big spoiler warning from here on out, especially for the big turns in Season 2. A huge component of Dino Fury's story is Zeto's homesickness, his desperation to find signs of his people still being around after his 65 million year slumber. The whole backstory for this has some really interesting world building, which pulls together elements that were originally from completely different series in a way that actually serves this one more than anything else. So a big part of Dino Fury's lore are the Morphin Masters, who were originally referenced in Mighty Morphin to explain a MacGuffin of the week, and only appeared for like 3 seconds via blurry, distant stock footage of G-Ranger characters. I'd roll my eyes at such big importance being given to a throwaway line being used to explain why Rita Repulsa wanted some eggs or whatever, but even I have to give Dino Fury some credit for making good use of the concept and incorporating it in a natural way that doesn't feel like it's empty or just Mighty Morphin pandering. The Masters are integral to the series, as beings who are revealed to exist just out of frame, having created the power sources to many Ranger teams, but now live under a vow of non-intervention. Or so we think, until it's revealed that the Green Morphin Master has been secretly intervening in past events, being the catalyst for various miraculous events throughout the franchise, like the legendary Battle of Super Megaforce. Her tampering with the flow of events leads to conflict between the Morphin Masters and a plot that sets up many key elements of the final stretch and possibly beyond.
I must warn you of the Saber's ultimate attack. Anyone who uses this to destroy their enemy will also be destroyed.
Also, Mick from Ninja Steel shows up to exposit about him. Love Mick. Something else I've noticed about this show setting is the sort of interplay between classic superhero tropes and the modern world. So, for instance, this show's local hangout set, the equivalent to the juice bars, cyberspaces, and pizza places of shows past, is the Buzz Blast office, where I previously mentioned Amelia and Javi work. Superheroes having a day job in mass media is very classic. Think Clark Kent or Peter Parker. But the modernization, the fact that it's a social media company with a more lax, non-traditional work environment, lets it pull double duty as a comfy, chill hangout spot for the characters. Another Silver Age superhero trope put into play here is the Ranger Hotline, where people call in sightings of Sporks or Sporks beasts. This does a lot for the show, I think. It makes the Rangers feel like they're heroes of the community, something that's always appreciated, helping the world feel real and giving an extra wrinkle to the theme of cooperation. It also helps the villain encounters feel more natural compared to constant sneak attacks or omniscient alarm systems. I mentioned the Sporks, and those serve as the driving force behind the show's conflict. The Sporks are alien life forms that can take monstrous form or serve as a potent energy source, and which are released onto Earth in the first episode. The Rangers' goal is to reclaim all the Sporks before they can cause Earth's downfall, like they caused Ravcons. Well, like I mentioned earlier, Void Knight's goal for the Sporks was to use their energy to awaken his comatose wife Santara and leave Earth. But when he succeeds, Santara refuses to leave. You see, when they first arrived on Earth, the government held them and their infant child captive at Area 62, leading to the accident in which Santara was left comatose and their child seemingly died. To get revenge on humanity, Santara uses the Spork's energy to become Void Queen, the second season's main antagonist. Void Queen's design, incidentally, is from a Sentai other than Ryusoulger, specifically Resha Sentai Tokyuger, which never got an adaptation. Power Rangers can be very clumsy in its combining elements from disparate shows, but this is actually a pretty good choice. The Tokyuger's villain's sophisticated regal aesthetic blends quite well with Ryusoulger's design philosophy. Also, did you notice? The Ryusoulger villain designs have a visual chess motif. Sentai villains tend to have design details like that to unify them. Now, usually, as I mentioned earlier, the crews behind Power Rangers just do not care, make exactly zero attempt to make their own additions fit in, which makes the show look sloppy. But see, the people behind Out of Fear, you could tell that they thought this through with their brains, because when they added a new member who wasn't in Ryusoulger, they made sure she fit the chess motif by being a queen, being an actual regal-looking design. Did you also notice the floor of Area 62 has checkered tiles, making it look like a chessboard? Now, in a major character beat for Tarek, he has no desire for revenge, and so is ousted from the Void family. He tries to help the Rangers, but encounters resistance from Zato, and just when he earns his trust, Void Queen forcibly abducts him and brainwashes him into her pawn, the Void King. As we find out, the sporks were created on the planet Ravcon with Zato's involvement, a past failure he is forced to confront with the arrival of the 6th Ranger, Ion, another survivor of the Ancient Knights. Ion's survival brings with it some tension. He believes he's better fit to lead the team than Zato, and with the truth of Zato's past now come to light, that might actually be true. It's such an interesting storyline the show tantalizingly dangles in front of us before glossing over it pretty quick with no real room to breathe. Ha ha! Oh man, all that stuff about them making sure there was an in-show logic for the Sentai villain designs, they still didn't bother justifying why the Gold Ranger's suit and morpher didn't match the rest. Ion is still a worthwhile addition to the cast though, feeling personality-wise like a mix of Zato and Mike from Samurai, a fun-loving hotshot, but one who has the skills, expertise, and honor to back his talk up, despite having a humility issue that he works on throughout the series. His chill nature also contributes to his easy connection to the rest of the cast. Even if their initial arc didn't get the breathing room it deserved, there's still an enjoyable dynamic within the group, and especially between Ion and Zato, which culminates in a battle against the manifestation of their regret over their original teammates' deaths. Ion is also tied to a prophecy told by the Green Morphin Master, in which he is the key to defeating a legendary villain.
Yeah, I dig it. On screen for the first time since the 90s, Dino Fury is the return of the very first American-created Power Rangers villain, Lord Zed. Zed makes a striking impression with his more active role in combat and more imposing redesign, bolstered by a more experienced stunt team and higher suit quality, letting him be much more of a physical threat than he ever was in his original run. Zed's original voice actor, Robert Axelrod, having since passed, the character is now portrayed by Venjik's voice actor, Andrew Lang. Compared to Axelrod, Lang has more variety in his performance. Robert's screamy voice might be better and more iconic overall, but Lang gives Zed more vocal range than previously heard. And I never thought I'd say this, as long as I had a beating heart and working lungs, but I'm actually excited to see Lord Zed return. What initially appears to be a fun little nostalgia-baity cameo actually ends up being a recurring role as a shockingly effective major villain for this series. See, right after the Rangers finally manage to find Ravcon again, Zed destroys it in the midst of his own scheme to create sporks. This leads into one of the show's final major plotlines. Hope is seemingly restored for Zato and Ion when a group of Ravconians travel to Earth. But their celebration is cut short when the Ravconian leader Aurea reveals she plans to colonize Earth. War is eventually averted when a show of bravery by Pop Pop shows her the beauty in humanity. And, as we find out, this isn't the first time Pop Pop has been involved with Ravconians, as we learn that Tarek and Santara are from Ravcon, and Pop Pop saved their child on the day of the Area 62 accident. Amelia is forced to confront the truth about herself, as well as confront her parents in combat, in the desperate hopes of saving them from their dark path. Ultimately, while Amelia succeeds in saving her father, Void Queen's use of all of the sporks proves overwhelming, until Zato sacrifices himself to right his own wrong and to ensure a peaceful future for all of his people and his friends by destroying the sporks and helping to save Santara. The planet Ravcon could easily have proven to be just an incidental bit of the backstory, something akin to Andrasia in Super Megaforce, for instance. But Dino Fury uses it as a strong driving factor throughout the show's narrative that ties up all of its plots in a very satisfying way by the end. It makes the show's world feel that much more cohesive. The show also seems to genuinely care about this planet and its people in a way that's frankly unusual for the franchise. Despite Power Rangers' obsession with adding sci-fi alien stuff to everything in spite of the source material, most entries don't care that much to define, flesh out, or really even empathize with the people of other worlds. What do we really know about Andrasians, for example, or Altarians, or the people of Sentai 6? From the show, not expanded media that may not be canon or outright contradict shit on screen later. That's right, not a lot. Meanwhile, while we don't have a Star Trek guidebook level of knowledge on Ravkonians, we do know way more about their history and culture than we do any of those other alien species, because Dino Fury took the time to expand on them and relate them to our experiences. And all of this really makes me wish we could have had much more detail and unique concepts put into previous seasons of the show. But for reasons we've learnt of recently, it's pretty clear why that wasn't the case. Just like my new look, Dino Fury feels like an attempt at refreshing the franchise to a much bigger extent than even Beast Morphers did. While that show inherited a lot of baggage, including most of the crew from the Saban Brands era, and thus feels sort of like Saban Brands, the epilogue, Dino Fury feels like the proper start to a new era, with a lot of fresh talent behind the scenes, including Bert Selman, who takes over as composer following the end of Noam Caniel's decade-long stint, though with its fair share of returning faces. It's an evolution of where Beast Morphers was. It's still a show aimed at kids, of course, but for the first time in a while, I felt completely unembarrassed to be watching it. The standards for kids' shows in the West are higher these days, and Dino Fury feels like an honest-to-God attempt to rise to those standards, instead of sticking stubbornly to what worked in 1993, like the Saban Brands era had. Of course, the crew behind the show didn't just start wanting to do things like this because of Hasbro's acquisition. We learned from Dino Fury head Simon Bennett that it would have happened earlier if the top-level executives running the show previously weren't actively preventing it until Hasbro bought the franchise and fired a number of them after Beast Morphers. I went over the Disney Power Rangers years over in my previous video on the PR franchise, Gridlocked. You can check it out here. Unless it's the future and YouTube's gotten rid of cards. Suffice to say, the Saban Brands era staff are more important to this discussion. While Disney held the series back in terms of material resources, the Brands era managed to sing the same tune but in a different key. Despite a few successes, these same years of the show smell of a desperate old man trying his damn hardest to hold on to writing philosophies and tropes that were outdated even 10 years after Mighty Morphin, let alone 20 years after, in much the same way Vince McMahon was running WWE until recently. It felt like the same death loop running over and there for years, applied to repurposed Japanese hero footage. Thank God I didn't get into wrestling until recently. Tangent over. This historical context is important. It explains why Dino Fury doing things that are pretty much standard for any other children's TV show in 2022 AD comes across as such a game changer for this 30-year-old franchise. If Disney, Saban Brands, and Hasbro were parents to the franchise, then Disney was the neglectful, hands-off parent. Saban Brands was the authoritative parent that tried to forcibly mold the franchise into something it couldn't and shouldn't be anymore, and Hasbro is a parent that actually is in tune with their children's needs and willing to provide them support needed to meet them. According to executive producer Simon Bennett, Dino Fury was originally intended as one 22-episode season. Then a second season was ordered later in the writing stage. So they kept the overall plot the same, but added 22 extra episodes scattered throughout. This expansion of the plot led to many storylines and character moments being pushed back to make room for more additional stories. Frankly, this causes the series to feel as though a lot of the setup in season 1 was forgotten for a while, until suddenly being remembered in the late stages of the show, rather than feeling like proper early setup, late payoff type developments. Things like Warden Carlos' character development, the motivations and wins of the Voids, and Ion's destiny mentioned by the Green Morphin Master, they show a few cracks from the stress of having to suddenly double their episode order. The pacing is just one of many elements that resulted from Dino Fury's rather tight scheduling stage. Some things slipped through the cracks, such as Izzy's original actress, Alexandra Nunez, was originally cast in the role, as we learned from obnoxious leaks before the cast reveal, but was recast with Tessa Rao before shooting. The suit actor for Dino Fury Green had already been cast with Alexandra's build in mind, leading to a noticeable disconnect between morphed and unmorphed Izzy. Regardless, we all love Tessa Rao here. With all of that stuff out of the way, now, what do we here at our slightly radioactive circus think of Dino Fury? Well, Power Rangers Dino Fury just visually is gorgeous to watch. The new cameras employed for this show really do wonders to make a gosh darn Power Rangers series absolutely a visual joy to look at, in a way that stands out from everything that came before. We even get some extremely beautiful shots of New Zealand grassland and forest to stand in for the planet of Ravcon. It's some camera work that's way more interesting than anything they've ever tried before. The music, good golly, that damn music. Well, I could use a bit of a longer main theme, something we've clearly been robbed of thanks to capitalism. Dino Fury's music is absolutely phenomenal. Bert Sellen's work on the series is not only quality, but varied. The soundtrack has enough of an auditory spectrum for each scene's mood to feel properly set, from deep emotional pieces to killer rock tracks that really pump you up to see some Dino Fury victory. Credit should also be given to Chance Perez, who sings a couple lovely in-character vocal tracks. The fights were rather good. I was pretty impressed by the quality of the action this year, with fun moments like Ion sliding around on grunts, to Lord Zed's meaty beatdown, and of course the absolutely show-stopping final battle atop a giant monster. These battles were nicely complemented by those seen in Ryusoulger, which itself has excellent action. They also created a lot of original props and sets to add into the fights, from the good, to the mid, to the, oh man, I wanna cry. Look at that. Ugh. With all that in mind, I will now rank Dino Fury on a scale from 1 to 10 alpha 5 out of 5s. It's a really confusing scale, I won't lie. Wait a second, go back. Enhance. I cannot let these blights on the good of humanity go unpunished for their sinful transgressions. So welcome to the Dino Daggers Rant Corner, where we rant about how the Dino Daggers are the biggest jobbers in the history of Power Rangers. I'm flabbergasted this franchise could dedicate so many resources into creating an all-new non-Sentai toy, only for it to be so mind-blowingly uncool, and that's saying a lot. These things never actually help with anything. They're like a minor inconvenience at most. A housefly could achieve this effect. Actually, scratch that. They succeed at one task in the first 22 episodes, which still ends up requiring 4 to get swatted away first. These things are so transcendently lame, I almost have to convince myself it was deliberate, which obviously can't be the case, because they were invented to look cool and sell additional toys. But why would you want to buy these dinky little knives that suck? Then they got like one more win in the finale of all things. Let me keep going on about the stuff I wasn't super big on, since I'm already on that sort of train. Another thing I kept noticing, which might not seem like a big deal, regards Russell Curry's ADR in the morphed scenes. Zato has this very dignified, poised, yet stilted demeanor and manner of speaking that's appropriate both for a classic knight and for an alien very out of his element. Russell Curry pulls that off very well in his on-camera scenes, but since voice acting requires a totally different skill set from physical acting, he doesn't quite pull it off in the same way in his Ranger scenes, making for a sort of unnatural disconnect. This does get better as the show goes on though. By season 2, he's bridged the gap pretty well. Out of the consistent villain generals, it's a little bothersome that Slither is the one who's least fleshed out in terms of like having a purpose to be there, besides his shape-shifting abilities. Mucus adds comedy and is a foil for Void Knight's empty nest syndrome, while Slither is just kind of there on the side. Either way, I went into Dino Fury having marathoned nearly the entire franchise around a year prior, as part of making a whole feature-length video on it. My mind was so gunked up from having years of Power Rangers blasted into my brain within a short span of time that I was weirdly down on the series following that video, despite wanting to be hopeful about the future. So, even though I could definitely tell Dino Fury Season 1 was the best season they've done in years, I didn't feel moved by it in the way I had with these shows in the past. But then I put off thinking about the show for a while, and by the time I marathoned it for this video, I think I could see it with clearer eyes, and I was straight up astonished. Not only was it better than the first half, it felt like a proper evolution and revolution for the series, something that wouldn't have been so clear had the aforementioned Power Rangers brain blasting not made me see the state of the franchise was in. I think there's probably a good number of Power Ranger heads who are in that same sort of mind space, who can't view the series favorably due to the desensitization. Some of Dino Fury's harshest critics that I've seen are the same kinds of people who will constantly rewatch old episodes and read the latest Boom comics. It's honestly a bit of a shame how this can make some people miss out on the truly great show that is Dino Fury. But as someone who was in that same boat, I have faith that in a few years, those same fans will be able to look back on the show with fresh eyes. Till then, of course, this show is still getting lots of love from viewers, especially those who haven't become so cynical. They're willing to enjoy something without being held back by any preconceived notions of how the show must operate, unlike people set in their ways, thinking that it must feel like some sort of strange parody of those originals. An element I definitely think has driven the influx of newer fans is the show's representation. I don't just mean racial and ethnic diversity either, though this season did finally give us our first East Asian Red Ranger, but also our first actually canon, not just implied LGBT Ranger with girlfriend in Izzy. Izzy's relationship is a great instance of an arc about Ranger's personal life too, feeling much more real and human than, for instance, the Brody's brother arc from Ninja Steel. The heroes' personal lives feel a lot more fleshed out in general, thanks to stuff like the great supporting cast. It actually contributes a lot that the heroes actually have families, have parents that aren't just there for some mysterious missing relative who must become a ranger plot or something. But even when Dino Fury does a plot like that, it's handled with significantly more grace than other entries in the franchise. This use of family members is something carried over from Beast Morphers, and it works wonders for the relatability of the characters. If Beast Morphers felt like the Saban Brands crew's last hurrah, which, going by what Simon Bennett said, is pretty much what it was, Dino Fury feels like the first full taste of what Power Rangers can be under new leadership. Leadership that actually cares about moving forward instead of trying to relive 1993. If you've been turned off by Power Rangers before, or have just been away for too long, I think Dino Fury has a real shot at changing your mind, or rejuvenating your interest. Shortly before the end of Season 2, Hasbro announced the Dino Fury cast would be returning for a third season, titled Power Rangers Cosmic Fury. It was an absolutely bonkers announcement, by the way. The first third season since the 90s, the first ever to just use totally new American-made suits, the robots from Uchu Sentai Q Ranger? That's on top of the big 30th anniversary celebrations with the original cast, and the big Jonathan Entwistle project still in the works. Man, I'm actually looking forward to seeing what comes next. I can't predict it, and that's so weird and genuinely exciting. I can say confidently that after so long of trying to understand this franchise and its future, I have no idea what's going to happen next. And I couldn't be happier.
There's a whole world you haven't even tapped into yet. But you gotta believe you deserve it. And when you do, you'll be blown away by what you can do.
Ranger hotline, what's your damage?